very simple sort of aha, light bulb, obvious things when they're articulated about what are preventative measures and or smart measures for the long term.
Yeah.
When you look at a community such as the Pacific Palisades that is on a hill,
Right.
that is developed and has been developed for quite a long time, has
Sure.
a lot of dry vegetation. Um, I think what you're saying is really kind of a something very simplistic that applies to most places. If you
Mm,
catch it high and you catch it early,
yeah.
meaning I mean high on a slope, and early meaning the same thing when
Yeah.
it's starting at the top of the
Yeah.
problem, it's a lot easier to slow it down. Once it's gotten momentum all the way down the hill, and I can use that sort of as an
Sure.
analogy and
Yeah.
literally, depending
Yeah.
upon the
In some cases,
situation.
yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah, it actually is embarrassingly simple that if we had just captured all of that beautiful rain when it was coming and sunk it into the ground,
Well,
rather than letting it all go or sending it off to your neighbor or wherever
sure.
else.
Sure. There's a certain amount of logic to that, right? But there's some events, right, that are overwhelming even that. I mean, there are, swales and, water catchments around the world that are blown out because it wasn't designed for that 100-year storm or that unpredictable
Mm,
occurrence. So it is simple in the short and long term. What that would cause is revegetation, rehumidifying, more water higher up in the watersheds. But if we're talking about the fires to hit Los Angeles, right? There's basically nothing that you know once it's that fierce. I mean, we all know the fire triangle, right? Heat and fuel and air, right? You think of how much heat there was. There's nothing that outweighs that. I mean, there's nothing that you could have taken and put over that to quench that, right? You couldn't overpower the heat part of it, and the fuel part of it was the design part that we could be discussing, right?
right.
That the way that we put it in harm's way, right, is like it's almost the analogy of putting a big fat log on a fire, as opposed to a bunch of kindling, right? A lot of airspace, a lot of small diameter twigs in a fire is going to go hot and fast because of all the air, right? The fuel is primed to because the heat overwhelms it, right? But if you put a big log in that same fire, then and we've all been around the campfire where somebody does that, puts a big log in it that is too much fuel to compensate for the heat. So the heat doesn't flame it and it just sits there and smolders, right? So designing communities that are hardened, right, or won't just go up in smoke, if you're going to set it in the middle of a fire path. Our areas are, like I described that braided stream pattern, that is a flood area. You know, the highest, fastest, cheapest, smartest way to mitigate flood damage is don't build in the floodplain, right? And
Right.
where we put our houses in Los Angeles is a fire dependent community of plants and animals, right? A coastal chaparral. So we know the fire's coming, so let's design accordingly.